Hi and welcome to this week's video, which is the top 10 financial risks for 2021. As voted on by my private community, we had hundreds of votes cast on this poll, and I'm going to go through that right now. Okay, let's start in reverse order then with number 10, and this received 24 votes, and this was Riots and Violence. Now, I've got to say, I was quite surprised that this came in last place. I was expecting this to be a concern for a lot more people and a lot higher up on the chart, especially as we've seen some events recently that have been taking place. And again, this is more of a controversial topic, but of course the incident at Washington, D.C., at the Capitol. Just looking at some of the media coverage on this, very, very interesting. You have all sorts of coverage from a domestic terrorism event and 10,000 protesters attacked the building, right through to peaceful protests with 20 people attacking or whatever inside the building. Very, very different how the media are covering this. But I can say one thing for certain, was that there were not 10,000 people attacking that building. So let's just get that out the way. There were probably 100 at most, but the majority of people, it was a protest, it was a march. So I think we just need to clarify that first and foremost. But in terms of violence on the streets and this sort of thing, this I would say is in conjunction with a number of other events that may or may not happen. And usually the worse the economy becomes, the higher the chance of violence. And of course, we've seen riots in the past, a number of reasons, but one that I think is a real risk is something like food riots, which we saw in the Great Depression. And to give my input on this, I actually believe that this is far too low on the list to be in the last place. I actually think this should be a lot higher on the list because this is simply history repeating. If you look back at previous crises, you often get quite violent protests and riots, violence occurring when people don't have food, for example, or when they become hungry. We've already seen these big miles long lines at food banks now. So I definitely think this is something that you should monitor and actually watch over, because if you do see things like this start to happen, it's highly likely that more are going to come in the future as the recession or depression worsens in nature. Number 9 on the list then, with 26 votes, this was government spending. A lot of people are concerned at the moment with the levels of government spending, with the levels of new currency being created, the US dollar, huge trillions of dollars worth of new dollars being created. A lot of people are very concerned about this. And if you don't understand why this is a concern, it's because it does several things. But one, it weakens the currency already in existence. So it's very, very bad for savers. But the second thing it does is it causes inflation later on down the line. Usually inflation in food prices. So again, linking to the last point, number 10. And usually when food prices rise, wages don't keep up with those rises. So it causes an issue here in terms of the standard of living actually reducing for many citizens. Number 8 on the list then, with 39 votes, no surprise, is food shortages or food-related supply problems. Again, this links in with the last 2 points. And if you remember my video from last week, my warning video where I talked about slumpflation and a few other concepts, you remember that the food prices, we talked about the World Food Index, actually rose by 6.6% throughout 2020. This is a rapid rise, and this was 7 months straight leading up to December of 2020 of price rises every single month. This is a concern because it's only a matter of time until these rises in the food prices will hit consumers, it will hit the supermarkets, and this is when you'll be affected. And of course, we mentioned previously about the inflation coming in at the same time. This is when your wages will be quite stagnant, and yet you'll be competing against a rise in food prices, and of course, this affects your standard of living. Number 7 then surprised me somewhat. This was with 42 votes, and this was travel bans. So a number of people made comments to accompany their vote, saying they were concerned that there would be new travel bans or new passports where they were, COVID passports and things like that. Whereas, there's a number of people who simply do not want to take any vaccines or anything like that until a lot later on. So a number of people are concerned that they're going to be forced to actually take this, whether that's for international flight, whether it's getting on a train or getting on a bus or a boat or ferry or whatever it is. There are a number of people who are very concerned about these travel bans. I know in the UK, currently we have a lot of different regions, and each region there's a tier system. So a number of people have highlighted their concerns about these new regions and what will happen. Can you cross over regions without having this new passport and all these sort of things, these medical cards and things like that. So you may be wondering why this is on the list of financial concerns. Well, a number of people are concerned that they won't be able to gain employment, or they won't be able to work, or they could even be fired if they don't adopt some of the measures which a number of people are uncomfortable with. Hi, if you're getting value from this video so far, could you do me a quick favor? Just click the like button below. It just helps with the algorithm and the ranking. And why not subscribe to the channel? I bring you videos like this every single week. And please just drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you all. Thank you so much. Number 6 on the list then with 48 votes is unemployment. And I can certainly see why so many people would be concerned about unemployment and rising unemployment, because it's one of my concerns as well as we go forward in 2021 and into 2022. You see me talk a lot about the businesses that are collapsing. Every time a business collapses, it takes the jobs with the company. And of course, that means that there's now new people unemployed, which are going into the job-seeking market, which is already quite heavy. There's already a lot of people in that market. So you're getting more and more people making the market bigger at a time when there are less jobs available. Number 5 then, with 55 votes, is the vaccine. Unfortunately, I can't talk about that on this channel, so we'll move on from number 5 to number 4. Number 4 then, with 62 votes, is business collapsing or business closures. And we're seeing this is getting more and more rapid now. We're seeing more and more companies, more businesses, more shops on the high street and in the malls actually closing or going into administration, going out of business, bankruptcy. So I certainly agree with this. We're seeing a lot of parallels here with previous crises. And if we look at what happened during the Great Depression of the 1930s, you saw just how long it took for the businesses to finally close their doors and to collapse. This time around, because of the lockdowns that are in force, a lot of the businesses are collapsing at a much quicker rate. I mean, this time it has happened in a fraction of the time as previous crises. So this is also a concern for me, because the more businesses that collapse, again, the bigger the unemployment pool becomes, and the harder it is to get everything back on track. When businesses collapse, it means people are spending less money in those businesses. It means that there aren't as many taxes going into the government. There aren't as many transactions. The velocity of money drops. It creates a self-fulfilling negative spiral downwards. Okay, let's move into the top 3 then. Number 3 with 65 votes is bank bail-ins or financial corruption. If you don't know much about bank bail-ins, this is a new concept, a new phenomenon, if you were. It's happened in a couple of countries already. Of more recent was Cyprus, of Greece, where people actually lost their savings that were in the banks there. Remember what I've said to you on a few of the videos. When you actually deposit your money with the bank actually takes ownership of your funds. They become the custodian of your funds, and they pay you an interest in return for them being allowed to loan out your capital or do whatever they want with it. And remember, there's no fractional reserve banking limit anymore, especially in the United States. So if your bank has been, and again, check this, if your bank makes loans, if they make business loans, if they loan on mortgages, You just have to be aware that they're carrying a lot of bad debt at the moment, especially as we go forward. With the businesses, they're carrying a huge burden there, a huge liability. Now, if the housing market starts to have any difficulties as we go into 2021, that's really when you've got to be very, very concerned about your savings in the bank. Now, of course, we do have these insurance programs, these bank insurance programs, FDIC, etc. But if you actually do the research and look into them like I have, you'll find that there's a lot of red flags there for me. I don't personally feel that they are funded. And if anything does happen, such as some sort of a financial collapse, then I think we'll all be very hard pressed to get our funds out of the bank. And this is why I don't keep a lot of cash in the bank personally. Number 2 then, with 74 votes, is a deep recession. So this is the second biggest fear that people have about 2021, is a severe recession. I don't really think we can discount this anymore. We've already gone into a recession. It was a very bad and very deep recession before somewhat of a recovery, but I still stand by my points that I don't think it is a real recovery, because it was a recovery in stimulus at the same time as asset prices exploding up in value, the housing market, the stock market, etc. So I personally feel that we are going to continue in the recession. I do think that it will get a lot deeper in certain countries that keep doing more and more lockdowns. And the more the government does this with keep on creating all this new currency, the harder it is on savers, because it keeps depreciating the value of the currency, the money that you have in your bank accounts that you've been saving up. Because of course, all of this currency creation, or this new money creation as it were, it will catch up with us eventually. This will create high inflation as we go into 2022. It is going to catch up with us. It does have to be paid back. There's going to be more taxes imposed upon us once things start to settle down again. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the richer people in society start to get taxed as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see second home taxes and all these other policies coming into effect in order to pay back all of this money that's been created to get us through this crisis. And number 1 then, this was the biggest fear that everybody had, with a whopping 102 votes. This is a complete financial collapse. And I personally feel this is more than warranted right now as a concern. However, I don't think the collapse, if there is going to be a complete collapse, will occur in 2021. I'd also be surprised if it occurred in 2022. Usually these things take a little bit of time to happen. What you'll notice is the devaluation of the currency at a quite rapid rate. And then if you've ever heard the term the hockey stick before, that's basically what happens at the end when the currency creation goes parabolic and it goes into a hockey stick shape line on the graph as it goes up. And at that point, you know that you're pretty close to the end of the current currency that we use. And a lot of people don't realize this, but this isn't the first time in history that we've had the collapse of a currency. In fact, this has happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times around the world just in the last 100 years. So although I do think the likelihood of a complete collapse is very low over the next year or two, I do think it is a lot more likely to occur from 2023 onwards. But again, this is just mere speculation at this point, because it's very hard to track and to see what actually will happen with the current COVID crisis as we're going through all these stages. We're seeing different lockdowns and different restrictions and measures in different countries. But one thing is for sure, if you look at all the countries that have taken lockdown measures, the businesses in those countries are collapsing, which means the jobs will collapse, which means that people will have less money to spend in the economy. When there's less money in the economy, it brings down the GDP, the gross domestic product. Government income actually comes down because of tax revenues. It creates this self-fulfilling negative cycle that just keeps coming down and down and down. So this is just something to make a note of and just to watch out for when you see it happening. There's only really a couple of ways you can protect yourself against this, and that is to purchase real assets that you believe will go up in value, that you believe are undervalued right now in comparison to other financial assets. Me personally, I believe the stock market is overvalued. I believe the housing market is overvalued. I personally believe that cryptocurrency is undervalued. I believe that precious metals are undervalued. So that's just an example of two things that I invest in to secure my future. So I hope you got some value out of this short video today. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to click the like button, and why not subscribe to the channel to get more videos like this. Thank you so much. Take care. God bless.